G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Wine Back Wednesday. And before we get stuck into tasting the wine, I'm just going to take you a little tour of the new winery. We've moved everything in. We haven't finished putting the power in, but as you can see, we've got bits and pieces everywhere. Obviously a couple of little tanks, press, some few pallets of wine, stacks of barrels. As we keep on walking down here, I'm nearly finished putting all the racking in. Obviously we've got some at the back here already in there, and then there's some more pallets of bits and pieces ready to rock and roll. Little bottling lines around the corner, we've got to bring that back up to the other end of the shed once all that's done, but overall we're getting there, and yeah, it's a bit of fun, but a big game of Tetris. Let's go. I might wander out the vineyard, we might taste some wine out there. The rain stopped, it's a bit wet, but at least it's dry. Hey everyone, again, yeah, we're just out here, just in front of our Shiraz block. So today we are going to be tasting a wine from this Shiraz block here, but I might nip back inside because it is cold out here, it is a bit breezy, and but I thought I'd bring you out here anyway. So everything's pretty dormant, obviously. And we haven't started pruning yet, and there's a couple of broken posts as well. Unfortunately, that is a occupational hazard. With machine harvesters, sometimes there's a weakness in the post, and they just crack off when they're being harvested down the row. So get some pruning done, then we'll replace those. Speak to you soon. Well. Back in the winery now, guys. Yeah, it was a bit cold out there and a bit wet and a bit breezy, so I thought I'd come back inside and finish off the Wine Back Wednesday. So as I showed you just before, we're out there in the Shiraz vineyard down here in Wollonga, adjacent to the new winery. And yeah, last year, 2023, we handpicked the first row on the western side adjacent to the road, and broke it down into 3 little fermenters. And last year, 2023, it was a third cool year in a row. Yields were moderate, but after sort of Christmas, New Year, had a really dry spell, and just really mild and pretty good growing and ripening conditions. And so we handpicked it in pristine condition, reasonably about 12.8, 12.9 BOME. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but that ended up being about 13 and a bit % alcohol in the 3 ferments. And this is the one that we've showcased this week. So I thought I'd just taste it with you today, and then the next 2 wines I'll taste in the coming weeks. So this is actually it's exactly the same fruit. So it's handpicked to stems. That's when all the berries come off the Rachis. And the Rachis is that little green bunch stems that we have in the bunch. And all the berries come off, and then I've added back into 2 of the fermenters different levels of those Rachises. So sometimes you can add it as whole bunches, and when often you hear of things like whole bunches in Grenache or Pinot Noir and Shiraz as well, obviously, and other varieties. You can add it as whole bunches, and then you get this. If you do that, with the berries are still intact and attached to the stems, you often get a thing called carbonic maceration. A little bit of fermentation occurs inside the berry, and it gives you more of this sort of confectionery lifted fruit character. But I remember years ago when I worked in Adelaide Hills, when I was working up there, we did a lot of trials, and we seemed to have better results with structure and finished wine holistically when you actually you actually destemmed all the fruit off the stems. So the berries come off the stems, or that Rachis as the thing's called, and then you actually added the Rachis back afterwards as a percentage. And so the one we're tasting today is 0%, so this is all destemmed fruit, not crushed or anything like that, just all destemmed, so pretty well, a lot of big berries. And then the other 2 little fermenters we had was 25%, and the third one was 50%. So quite a significant jump, and we'll taste those 2 in the coming weeks. So first of all, let's give this a crack. We've called it, I'm a glutton for punishment. I seem to be creating more work for myself, but it's always fun and interesting. As being a small winery, you can play around with these little things, and when they come off, You can bottle them up separately, and especially when you've got your own bottling line. So there's only, 130 something bottles of each, so really small, couple hundred kilos, 240 kilos of fruit from each parcel. So really small batch, tiny, and it's called the Smidge wine trial, the SWT, and this is 0%. So let's just give this a crack. Sorry, open that up. I'll just put that down there. So here we go. As you can see, lovely magenta, deep red magenta sort of colour, even with a bit of a black core. And it's very fragrant. We had a cool year and we picked it moderately early, but the hang time was good, so we had lovely ripe fruit characters. There was no sort of greenness or hard edges as such. So yeah, sort of some nice crunchy red fruits. There's some plums in there. Some lovely spice. Really fresh and vibrant. And in the background there's sort of this dark bitter chocolate sort of note that you can tell, dark chocolate sort of character, which obviously typically McLaren Vale is more, when the fruits are some more traditional vintage we have, so a bit warmer conditions, the fruit spectrum is more sort of the black fruit spectrum and chocolate mocha and spice, whereas this is probably a little bit more on the red fruit spectrum, just because it's a cooler year, so and picked a little bit earlier, so it didn't really, I suppose, develop into that darker fruit. I don't even know if it would have last year. Sort of some plums in there as well, but more, yeah, that sort of nice Satsuma plum. And the Cabernet last year was phenomenal as well. Again, it's a really crunchy red fruit spectrum. It's a nice spice, really long, lovely acidity. This came in and there was no adjustment to this wine. It's all natural ferment as well. No acid adjustment. Went through malolactic fermentation and still no adjustment. And the Rachis, when I was talking about before, the stems that we put back in, it's trying to add structure, and those stems that will have there's obviously some sappiness to them. There is a sort of a tannin sort of profile to them. You get this lifted profile on the nose, and the palate gives you this lovely fineness and sweetness sometimes. There's sweet talkiness, I find. If they're too green, you do get a green thread through the wine. And unfortunately, over time, that green thread from the Rachis typically doesn't recede too much. The fruit dissipates a little bit, and you end up with this sort of greenness often to the wine. If you pick the fruit, or when the fruit is picked, the Rachis is still green and sappy. But if you let, like a cooler year last year, even though there wasn't a huge amount of lignification, that's when the greenness turns to sort of a brown, and the tissue starts to lignify, which you often see in Northern Europe, in the cooler conditions up there. So Burgundy, for example, years gone by, when they add their bunches back, often they have a level of lignification, whereas in Australia, even in the cooler regions, lignification probably doesn't, it does occur, definitely, but maybe not to the extent of some other cooler countries and cooler wine regions around the world. So this had 0% Rachis in it, so it is what it is. There's this subtle fine tannin note through it. But when we taste the 25% and the 50%, I'm guaranteed there will be this sort of extra level of spice and lift from those Rachis on the nose and palate, but also this fine tannin sort of profile and this structure that will come with it, and it's creating some length and another dimension to the wine. So 0%, really lovely, crunchy red sort of plum, red fruits, plums, spice, some dark chocolate notes there. And on the palate, it's fresh and lively. Really, it's like drinking flowers in many ways. But then after about the mid palate, there is this sort of firmness that comes through, and this lovely fine tannin profile. But thanks for listening. It's a bit of a whirlwind one. We had a bit of a wander around the winery. We looked at the vineyard briefly, came inside because it was a bit cold, and tasted the wine in here. So thanks for listening. It's the SWT, the Smidge wine trial from 2023, our own home block Shiraz, the 0% Rachis. And look out for the next two episodes with 25% and 50%. Cheers.